Welcome to our video series that is all about semantics. If you're new here, my name is DiGilio. I was a primary teacher for 23 years, and on this channel, we talk all things literacy and reading instructions. Welcome back, and if you're new, please hit that little subscribe button and that little bell next to it so you're alerted every time one of my new videos goes live. Today, and over the next few videos, we are going to begin discussing what semantics is, why it's important for language and reading development, and how to implement simple activities in your classroom to actually support its development. Before we jump in, let's just take a quick minute to look at Scarborough's reading rope, and let's talk about where semantics lives on Scarborough's reading rope. So as you can see here on the image on your screen, we've got Scarborough's reading rope. We've got the upper strands, which are your language comprehension strands, and the lower strands, which are your word recognition strands. So semantics and syntax lives under that strand called language structures. So that's where you'll find semantics in the language comprehension strands of Scarborough's reading rope. So now that you know where it lives on Scarborough's rope and in language comprehension, we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about what semantics is and how you're going to actually teach it in your classroom. Let's jump into what is semantics. Let me start with a situation. So have you ever been in a situation where one of your students comes up to you and says, "What does this word mean?" And your response was, "Look it up in the dictionary." I know that was my response many times in my classroom over 23 years, especially after we learned how to use a dictionary. I loved teaching dictionary skills. It was one of my favorite things to teach. I know now in our digital world, we have dictionaries in the palm of our hand, but it is a skill that children should know how to do, right? So I'm sure that that scenario has come up in your classroom many times. Now, let me ask you a question. How many times have you looked up a word in the dictionary and kind of gotten to the bottom of whatever curiosity sent you there in the first place? Well, maybe you didn't go to a dictionary. Maybe you actually looked it up on your phone. I digress. Anyway, the truth is that word meaning is a little more complicated than just dictionary definitions. It's about semantic relationships and how different languages define and kind of interpret those relationships. So let's break it down in simple terms. Semantics is basically the study of meaning in language, and it really goes beyond a word's dictionary definition. Think of it like this. You know how the word cool can mean something awesome, like a really neat skateboard trick. But it can also mean someone's temperature is a bit chilly. That's actually semantics at work. But really, it's about understanding all the different meanings that words can have depending on the context they're used in. That's really important. So let's jump into syntax and semantics and how they work together. It's not just about individual words. Semantics works in combination with syntax to look at how words kind of come together to create meaning in those sentences that you see on a page and in paragraphs in a book. Like, why do we say hot coffee instead of coffee hot? Or why does big red ball make sense, but red big ball sounds a bit off? So when you're diving into semantics and syntax, you're basically kind of exploring this kind of amazing, fascinating world of how language works to convey ideas, feelings, and information. It's kind of like peeling back the layers of like a linguistic onion to kind of uncover all the juicy meanings. Now, we could never tackle the complexities of semantics and syntax in just one video. In this video, I'm going to focus on semantics, the secret sauce of language. Now, teaching kids about semantics might sound like diving into some super technical stuff, but it's actually really crucial for language and reading development. And if you use a few simple strategies, it could actually be pretty simple to address in your classroom. So let's jump into the importance of teaching semantics explicitly. First of all, when kids learn about semantics, they're not just memorizing words. They're actually understanding how those words convey meaning. This helps them communicate more effectively because they're grasping those nuances of language. For example, they learn that big and huge aren't exactly the same thing. So when we want to describe something accurately, they can pick the right word to do it. Learning about semantics also boosts comprehension skills, which is kind of the ultimate goal of reading. So when students or children understand the meaning of words and actually how they fit together, they can actually better understand what they're reading or what they're hearing. It's like they're decoding the language puzzle, which is really super important for school success and, of course, beyond school. Plus, semantics teaches kids to express themselves more clearly. They learn how to choose the right words to convey their thoughts and their feelings, which is a pretty handy skill to have in life. So whether they're telling a story or they're writing an essay or they're just chatting with friends, being able to express themselves accurately really helps them connect with others and get their point across. I mean, that's the whole idea of language, right? And let's not forget about critical thinking, right? So important we think about that. When children dive into the world of semantics, they start questioning things like, why did the author choose this word instead of that one? Or what does this phrase really mean? This kind of analytical thinking helps readers to become better problem solvers and definitely more engaged learners overall. Teaching children about semantics might seem like delving into the nitty-gritty of language, but it's actually setting them up for success in so many ways, from kind of improving their communication skills and to really boosting comprehension and critical thinking. Semantics is like a Swiss Army knife of language learning. It's got a tool for just about everything we need. Now let's move into semantics in action. We are going to talk about 7 simple activities to do in your classroom that focus on semantics. So during my 23 years as a classroom teacher, I tried so many different strategies to address semantics in my classroom. And there are many, many, many ways to do this. Some strategies might take you a few minutes, and others could take up the duration of an entire lesson. I've collected my 7 favorite strategies for quickly addressing semantics, and I'm going to share them with you in this video series that is going to continue past just this one video. I first want to note that I rarely taught semantics in isolation. It was always part of a larger study of important vocabulary words. I also found over the years that my favorite time to do a semantics activity was before reading a text, when I was like kind of activating and building background knowledge. I would first preview the text, pick out a few new or interesting vocabulary words, and build my semantics activities around those words. When I share my list of 7 favorite strategies with you, I want you to keep in mind that I always use the opportunity to tie the activity back to those key vocabulary terms that I identified. So important. All right, so now for the reveal. We are going to jump into my 7 favorite activities for addressing semantics while building background knowledge. The 7 different strategies for addressing semantics is synonyms, comparatives and superlatives, homophones, categorization and classification, semantic maps, prepositions, and pronouns. Those are the 7 kind of areas that we're going to talk about when it comes to semantics. Now that I gave you the list of my 7 favorite activities, I'm going to just dive into each one of those to just give you an idea of how I would do this. Right now, I'm just going to give you just a quick little overview of how these activities look, but then the 7 videos after this video will go in much, much deeper. So let's take a quick look at my slides so I can show you how I implement this within an actual lesson. The first activity to teach semantics through background knowledge is through synonyms. So here I would go through the book very quickly that I was using for my lesson, and I would choose this word gaze. And then that's what I would start with. And I would say, okay, I know that I want to really dig deep into this word gaze, and I would start with the word stare, because that is a synonym for gaze. So that was how I would kind of bring this word in, and we talk about words that have similar meanings. We could even use dictionary and dictionary skills to accomplish this. So I might talk about the word stare. What does the word stare mean? Because students probably know that word stare, and we can dig into it. And then we can get to the word gaze from the word stare. And I might even do a little partner activity where students are doing kind of like a turn and talk, thinking about synonyms for the word stare. Second activity is comparatives and superlatives. In this particular book, I would look at the word swiftest. For this activity, I would kind of make a list with animals that are actually known to be swift, right? And we would take turns comparing these swift animals using comparison words like faster and fastest and slower and slowest. And the students must use the word swift in their sentence. For example, though the cat is swift, he is not faster than a cheetah. So this is the way I would bring in, again, looking at the vocabulary word and using comparatives and superlatives. Again, I'm just going through these ideas really, really quickly. Next is through the use of homophones. So here I would go through the book that I was using and pick out 2 words that are homophones that have different meanings, but maybe same spellings and of course, same pronunciation. So here I would model how to use the word letters in both ways, right? So letters can mean letters like the alphabet, or letters that are written letters that are sent to someone. So this is how I would introduce homophones in a lesson. I'd pull out 2 words, and I would also really bring students in to see if they can find words that can have 2 meanings, like the words spring, two and two, right and right, well and well, fly and fly, bat and bat. So I would ask students to go into the book and see if they could find a word that has more than 1 meaning. So that's a quick way of bringing homophones in. Another idea is through categorization and classification. So here for this particular book, I'd pull out the word foe, and I would ask students to brainstorm a list of animal foes, and they would work with a partner or again in small groups, and we complete like an open sort, kind of placing the foes into categories of their choosing. And then once we sorted the groups, we take turns kind of sharing their lists with the categories, and while other groups try to guess what the categories must be. So we would divide these into like farm animals or zoo animals, and that's the way we can maybe categorize and classify these animal foes. Again, just a quick idea. Next is using a semantic map. So using a semantic map in this way, I would pull out a word from the story. Again, for this particular story, I pulled out the word wean. We would write the word wean on a board or a dry erase board. We draw a circle around it, and then we draw lines stemming outward, kind of like a sun. And students would take turns naming animals that must be weaned from their mothers, meaning they no longer drink milk from their mothers. So they must use the word wean in their example, like the piglets were weaned from their mother's milk at 6 weeks old. And as a bonus, once the map is full of words, students could attempt to sort them into categories, just like we talked about in the previous one with categorization, like farm animals, zoo animals, pets, etc. So that is using a semantic map, again, bringing in some of that background knowledge here. Talking about prepositions is the next one. So here I pulled out the word coast. Now remember, we're doing this through understanding language and vocabulary development. So I pull out the word coast from this book, and I'd show pictures of the coast, and we discuss some things that may happen at the coast. Students can work with a partner again or in small groups and describe the coast using prepositions like the word coast, and the word coast can be utilized in each sentence. So we would start with the example. At the coast, the waves crashed into the rocks and on the sand. So that was a way to bring in using prepositions, but again, bringing in that vocabulary development as well so they understand the word coast. So that's how we can bring in prepositions. Now let's talk about how we would use pronouns. Again, this is a semantics activity. So what I would do is I'd write the following sentences on the board. Steve, Tess, Bart, and Star made a fort. Steve's dad made dinner. Star and Tess put the tarp over the fort. So what I would do is I would pull the word, again, pull the vocabulary word fort from the book. We would talk about the word. What does that word mean? And then I would have students either work with a partner or in groups. And then I would bring these sentences in it and say, okay, what word can we use instead of Steve, Tess, Bart, and Star made a fort? What word can we use to take the place of Steve, Tess, Bart, and Star? And we can, again, you bring in that vocabulary use of the word fort, but then bring in pronouns to help it. So this is just another way of really helping students use semantics and connecting it with vocabulary development as well. So this is just a very quick overview of my 7 favorite activities to bring semantics into your lessons. But again, they're weaved in with background knowledge and vocabulary development. So that's how I would bring in my 7 favorite activities. And again, remember, we're going to go deep into each of these activities in the next 7 videos that are related to semantics. Now, keep in mind, I do not do all of these activities every single day, but I do strategically place these activities in my scope and sequence so that before I'm introducing a text to students, I'll address at least one of these. And again, it doubles as a vocabulary preview of important words that students are going to experience in a text. If you want to dive deeply into each strategy, I really want you to dive into my video series where I break down and demonstrate each of the semantics activities in more detail. So this was just a quickie intro video to explain what semantics is and how we use it and why we use it. And it was a quick overview of its importance in language and reading development. And it's so important for reading development. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, over the next 7 videos, we're really going to dive deep into semantics over the next 7 videos. And we're going to talk about each of these 7 individual activities that you can bring into your instruction to really nail down your semantics instruction. So I hope you found this little overview on semantics informative and helpful to just give you an overall understanding of what it is. And I would love for you to tune in to the next 7 videos in this series to check out all that I have in store for you. And be prepared because I've got a lot coming your way when it comes to reading instruction and all things literacy, especially when we're dealing with structured literacy. So again, if you're new to my channel, please click that subscribe button and that little bell next to it so you're alerted every time one of my new videos goes live. And don't forget, come on back for the next 7 videos in this video series all about semantics. Thanks so much for watching and happy teaching.